Thank you. I think we are officially recording now. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for joining me this afternoon for Clean Boats, Clean Waters training. I'm Erin McFarland. I work for Extension Lakes in the College of Natural Resources building here at UW Stevens Point. And typically, I'm working across the state on Clean Boats, Clean Waters education with a lot of different AIS staff who work in counties and regions. And then I also travel to different locations that have fewer AIS staff and need help with some Clean Boats, Clean Waters supporter trainings. The main difference, however, is that I'm not usually doing these trainings online. All of us are adjusting to these different times. So we thought this would be a good option to offer the watercraft inspection training to folks who don't have someone locally closer to them. And especially given that going out for trainings with groups of people probably is not the best idea right now. So we wanted to offer an alternative. I'd like to take a minute. It looks like we've had maybe a couple more people join us just to go down the list of attendees and let folks introduce themselves. If you could just say your name and what organization or lake group that you're from and why you're joining us today, or what motivated you to join today, that would be really helpful. Before we do that, I'm just going to give a quick overview. We're using Zoom today to help support this training. And if you're new to Zoom, I think it's fairly user friendly. You should have a toolbar along the bottom of your screen that has some options. There's a mute button. Looks like a microphone that you can push, and it shows the microphone slashed out. That means you're muted. And then if you click it, that makes you unmuted so you can speak and others can hear you. And then there's also a video button that has this similar slash across it that indicates if it's on or off. I don't know that we're going to need to use our videos today, but maybe at the end of the training, if we'd like to do that, we can turn our videos on and sort of share any questions and things that we have. If you do have any questions whatsoever during the training, I don't mind if you'd like to interrupt me since it's a small enough group, or if you would like to use the chat box, that's on the bottom bar of your screen as well. It looks sort of like a talk bubble, and you can use in that chat box the option to either message me directly or everyone in the room, which is perfectly fine. And if you'd like to submit questions that way, Amy's going to help me watch that box as well and tell me when I haven't noticed a question or if some things come up. But if you do have any further questions about how to use Zoom, just let us know and we'll help you. But if we can try to go down our list, I'll call on your name, and if you'd like to unmute yourself and tell us, like I said, what group you're with and why you joined us today, that would be wonderful. Darcy, you're first on the list. Would you mind unmuting yourself and telling us what area of Wisconsin you're from?
Yes, I represent Fish Lake in Burnett County, and I did attend the Burnett County Washburn training, but I understood that this may cover more on the invasive species, so I thought I could benefit by adding to my current knowledge because I'm new as the Clean Boats, Clean Water coordinator at our lake.
Okay, excellent. Well, and we'll cover some species, but you'll have to let us know if you have some specific questions that we don't address, and we'll try to cover those. Okay. Thank you, Darcy.
Thanks.
And Darcy, if you'd like to go ahead and mute yourself again, I think Tom Howlett. Tom, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm here representing Lake Association on Turtle Lake.
Okay, thanks for joining us today, Tom. And you're just looking for a refresher on clean boats, or is this your first year?
Well, this is my first time, so we're doing this and seeing what it's all about. I vaguely know what it's all about, but this sounded like it would be a little bit more in depth.
This will be more in depth, so you'll have to let us know if we don't cover some things you're wondering. But I think this will help you get a better idea of what the program's about.
Okay, my wife is attending with also.
Thank you. Oh, good. I'm glad. Perfect. Eileen, what lake or group are you with?
I am from Hasbrook Lake in Oneida County, Wisconsin. We just discovered milfoil last year, and we're hopefully going to get on it.
Yeah, and you've got good support in Oneida County too, with some local folks that can help with that.
We do. Stephanie's great. Awesome.
Yes, for sure. Thanks, Eileen, for joining us today.
Sure.
George, what part of the state are you from?
Hi, I'm also here with my wife Linda, and representing Hasbrook Lake with Eileen.
Oh, excellent. A group of folks. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Let's see. Jake, I sort of know who you are. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Jake. I'm going to be coordinating Clean Boats, Clean Waters programs in both Kewaunee and Manitowoc counties. And so I'm going to be training our first inspector later this week. And I wanted to just get an idea of how Erin runs her trainings and learn from that.
Excellent. Thanks, Jake. Jenna?
Hi. Yeah, I'm with Blake Lake in Polk County, Wisconsin.
Good. You've got Caitlin in your neck of the woods to help too.
All right.
I'll help you make some connections if you're new to the AIS world. I'm not sure who is in your local area, but Caitlin Anderson with Polk County Land and Water is a really good resource. I'm glad you could join us. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Jeremiah, what group are you with?
Hi, I'm with the St. Croix River Association. We do some of the landings on the St. Croix River.
Thanks for calling in today.
Yeah, you bet.
Kelsey?
Hi, everybody. I'm also with St. Croix River Association, and we did a lot of the boat landing, clean boats, clean water stuff last year, so I'm hoping to get a good refresher, especially in light of, COVID and everything.
Yeah, thanks, Kelsey. We'll try to cover all the above. We'll offer the usual training and then try to cover some of these new guidelines that we have just to help keep our inspectors and boaters and anglers safe. Yep, for sure. Linda, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Linda Adams. I'm also with Hasbrook Lake in Oneida County, outside of Lake Tomahawk, and I am looking to learn and start being an inspector for our lake. So I'm excited to learn information and try to curb the the infections that happen into lakes and learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Marina?
Hi, I am working as a conservation field assistant this summer with the Upper Sugar River Watershed Association in Southwest Wisconsin, and I've never participated in Clean Boats, Clean Waters yet, so I'm really excited to attend another training.
Thanks, Marina. Yeah, that's right. You're working with Matt up there,
Yes.
right? Mm-hmm. Good. Thank you. Mason, where are you from in the state?
I'm from Bayfield County, and this is my first year.
Excellent. Well, hopefully this will give you a good overview for getting started.
Okay, thank you.
Pat?
Yeah, I'm with Red Lake, and I believe my husband, who's the president of our association, took this last week, as well as another gentleman. I just really want to understand more and to help on our, with our boat launch, watching as boats come in and out and checking milfoil and that kind of thing. I grew up in Minnesota, and that's where my home is, but our cabin is on Red Lake in Wascott, Wisconsin. And I grew up with milfoil, so I know how scary that is and how important it is for us to really be monitoring our boat landing.
Thank you, Pat, for joining us.
Welcome.
Penny, I think, is next. Where are you from, Penny?
I'm from Fish Lake with Darcy and Burnett County.
And Tom is in Burnett County now. Tom Beauvais, I believe he's the AIS coordinator.
Okay.
Good, good. Thank you, Penny. Sam?
Are you going for Sam Coyne?
It doesn't work as well when there's two Sams, does it?
No.
Sam Hoffman, would you like to? We'll go with Sam Hoffman first. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, I'm with the Door County Soil and Water, and it's my first week on the job, so it's part of our training.
Excellent, thanks. Glad you could join us. And the other Sam.
I had a feeling this would happen. I'm Sam Coyne. I work for Door County Soil and Water also as a conservationist, and this is my first time running Clean Boats, Clean Waters for our county, and so I have my lovely seasonals here attending this training, and I'm hoping that I learn a lot too.
Great, thanks very much, Sam. And I believe Tina. Tina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Tina, and I'm also with the Door County Soils and Waters Department. Here for part of our training, and excited to learn some new information.
Good, thanks very much, Tina. I believe, and then Sarah is the last person, Sarah Winju, on our list, and she is also with the Extension Lakes crew. She let me know that she's in the middle of a phone call, but she was going to listen in and join us, and so we'll try to let her introduce herself maybe later during the training. So we'll let her off the hook for now. Well, thank you all for being willing to go around. I know it's kind of hard to do on the computer, but I really miss my in-person trainings that I would conduct and get to have these discussions with all of you face to face and get to help answer questions and see your passion and excitement. So it's really nice to hear voices on the other end, so I don't just feel like I'm talking to my computer screen. So thanks for that. I appreciate it. Before this training, I did send an email out to the folks who had registered as of around noon today that had our agenda and some handouts. If you didn't receive those items, maybe let me know in the chat, and I'll make sure then to send those things after the training, because I know some people maybe registered after that noon time. But basically, my plan is just to try to get everyone prepared for watercraft inspections, and also offer some suggestions on how you can more safely conduct inspections for this summer. Our agenda is sort of broken up into a few pieces. We were going to start just talking about aquatic invasive species and the issue that we have in our state, move to watercraft inspections, and what is it, what are we trying to accomplish, and how do we talk with folks at the boat landing, and then just take a quick breather if we need to get up and stretch, and then go over some of our guidelines that we have in the state regarding COVID-19 and show you some inspection video scenarios, because one of the challenges in not getting to do this in person is we don't necessarily get to do the role-playing portion, but the nice thing is we do have some resources on the Clean Boats, Clean Waters website that show examples of watercraft inspections, and you can see some examples and practice those in a separate event. So yeah, please do submit questions that you have in the chat box, or I have no problem with you interrupting me too. Like I said, it's a small enough group. I think we can make it work. And thanks to Amy again for helping me with some of the chat questions and things. So we'll try to go forward here. I introduced myself briefly, but I just wanted to mention the Wisconsin Lakes Partnership, especially those of you who are with lake organizations. I hope maybe you've heard of us, and if not, no problem, but maybe you've been to the big statewide convention that we usually have in the spring. This past spring was the first year in ever in the 40 some years that we've been having this convention that we were not able to hold it in person, but we had an online event that I think went pretty successfully, which was really great. But the Wisconsin Lakes Partnership was initially started with these three groups that you see on the screen. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources represents the science and research arm, and also an important funding source for the partnership. We also have the Wisconsin Association of Lakes, or Wisconsin Lakes as it's known now, and that's the citizen advocacy portion. These are folks, they're Their office is located centrally in Madison, but they're across the state of different lake groups and individuals who live on lakes or members of Wisconsin lakes, and they can advocate for helping protect and do certain things on lakes. And then the third arm was the education and outreach aspect, which we represent at Extension Lakes. We're located at UW-Stevens Point in the College of Natural Resources. And so we try to offer Lake Tides, our newsletter that we have released quarterly, is one of our educational efforts, in addition to the Clean Boats, Clean Waters program, the Citizen Lake Monitoring Network, Lake Leaders, and our Lakes Convention. And I'm sure there's a few others that I'm forgetting to mention. But these are the three groups that the partnership started out with. We've really expanded now, and we have many partners within counties. There's nonprofit groups, other universities, but this is just an example of where we're trying to form a well-rounded partnership that covered a lot of different aspects of the elements that you need when you're going to do lake conservation. So like I mentioned, I'm going to start out just talking about what invasive species are in general. Like I said, if you'd like to share something, feel free to unmute and tell me some things. But typically, I like to kind of do a Q&A with the invasive species portion. But I'm just going to share some info, and you guys can let me know if you have any questions. I just like this slide because it's amusing. But really, we're just going to talk about what invasive species are here. So in Wisconsin, you know that we have a wonderful water resource available to us. I'm from Tennessee originally, and so when I moved up to Wisconsin, we have more rivers, and people enjoy recreating in rivers and a few lakes in the central part of the state. But moving up to Wisconsin, I had no idea of the resource that was available of freshwater lakes. It's just amazing. And of course, we have a lot of people who enjoy these lakes. We have probably more than 1 million boaters enjoying our waters each year. And I've heard reports that we have lots and lots of people out this summer, especially because we're getting sick of being stuck inside and people are starting to go out and enjoy themselves. But it also poses a challenge for all of us who either live on lakes or enjoy lakes, because it means a lot of traffic, a lot of boats are heading up north. This is an image of some people heading up north on a weekend. It's exciting to go out and use your lake, but it also means there's more human traffic to our lakes, which poses a challenge and the need for our Clean Boats, Clean Waters program. So what are invasive species? I remember learning about invasive species when I was in high school, I think, and usually what we were taught was these are species that are just from somewhere else, right? And oftentimes they're not always just from another country. They certainly can be, and many of the ones we have are, but they could just be from other parts of the United States. But they're things that are out of place. They're non-native. They're not from here in Wisconsin. Not all non-native species are invasive, but they often are because they don't have those natural predators and illnesses and viruses to help keep their populations in check. The native species can't hide and compete with them as well, because these non-native species come in, they don't have anything to keep their populations in check and keep them down, and they can really reproduce in large numbers typically. And so it just makes it really easy for these non-native species or invasive species to reproduce and overpopulate and outcompete those native species. So how do they get here? Like I mentioned, maybe some of them come from within the US and many come from far, far away across the sea. Well, especially when you look at maps of Wisconsin, we are very well connected with our Great Lakes very nearby. And so the shipping industry is one of the ways that some of these invasives have arrived. Ballast water is something that our ships, the large ocean-going vessels, use to help balance out their cargo load. They might pull in water or release water, which is what you see in that picture there, just to help them adjust their weight in the boat. And when they do that, they're not only taking in the water, right? They're taking in all the things that are living in the water. And some of the invasives we have are microscopic in various stages of their life. And so it's very easy to bring something from way across the ocean and bring it right here to our doorstep in Wisconsin. In some cases, we intentionally introduce different species. We think something's really attractive or pretty, or we think, oh, that'd be really fun for us to fish for in our waters, and not thinking about some of the negative impacts it could have on on our lakes down the road. And another one it's still, it's all of these are challenges, but we're taking steps to address them. But one that continues to be a challenge, especially with the ability to purchase things online very easily, are the aquaculture and aquarium trade. It's very easy to order aquatic plants for your aquarium or fish to be in your aquarium, and it's more difficult to ensure that people aren't then releasing these things out into their backyard lake or pond. And so it's a challenge, and we try to address these from different aspects of our aquatic invasive species program. So how do these non-native plants and animals that are causing invasive issues, how do they spread? And I always tell folks these first 4 bullets have a theme, and it's humans, right? You're probably on this training because you know all of this information, but our boaters and anglers unwittingly can spread these invasives from our Great Lakes to our inland waters and from one lake to another. It's just so easy for these invasive plants and animals to hitch a ride in a lot of circumstances. We also have natural dispersal that occurs. I don't think it's the majority of the time from the research that's been done, but it's certainly not out of the question that the waterfowl could help spread. But unfortunately, animals don't travel quite as easily or smoothly as humans do from lake to lake to lake when they're boating and fishing and recreating. So why do we care? Again, I think back to my high school biology classes, and I remember the main reasons that were always, shared with us was, well, these invasive plants and animals, they just have such a negative impact on those native fish, those native invertebrates, the native plants, and they do. That's definitely one of our major concerns. But another element that I think people think less about sometimes are the economic impacts that these invasive species can have. That picture on your screen, those are zebra mussels, and it's actually hard to tell what exactly they're attached to. Zebra mussels will attach to any hard substrate or surface in large numbers. And so you can kind of see them clumping on. That might be a pipe or a piece of trash that got pulled out of the water or something like that. But those are all individual little zebra mussels. But you can imagine how those zebra mussels could easily clog a water intake pipe, for example, or have really negative impacts for different industries. Commercial fishing and sport fishing is another concern. A lot of our invasives have negative impacts on some of our native fish populations, and so it can then affect our sport and commercial fishing and tourism too. Definitely. And we also have recreational impacts from invasive species too, through boating and angling. It can be more challenging to boat in a water body that has a blanket of Eurasian water milfoil covering it, for example, and that's one of the plants we'll talk about. So there's a variety of reasons of why we don't want these invasive species to be spreading from lake to lake or in our state. And when you talk to people at the boat landing, I think it's kind of helpful to think about what elements do you think might appeal to them more, or just having those sort of brief conversations with them about why are we standing here? Why do we care? So now we're going to just go through some of the common invasives that we have in the state. The challenge of offering this as a statewide training means I can't focus on just the specific things that are in one county, but this will give you a general idea, and we can help you find resources for more information if there's other species that you would like to learn about. This one is Eurasian water milfoil. You can see the image of the plant in both of these slides. The top one is like one piece of the plant, and it's a tall aquatic plant. So it roots in the bottom of the lake and grows all the way up to the surface. In a lot of cases, will just keep growing, so it can form sort of a long mat across the top of the surface, which is what you see in that bottom picture. I say it can because it does not always, and so there's a lot of research being done to determine what on earth would make this plant act one way in one water body and not in another. But in a lot of cases, it forms very dense mats of itself across the surface of the water. It's fairly widespread in the state. It's been here since the 1960s, and I'll show a map of the distribution of the plant in just a moment. But one of the challenges with Eurasian water milfoil, it can spread via what they call adventitious roots, so just along the stem it forms roots, but also just a small fragment of the plant can actually grow into an entirely new plant. And it's called fragmentation, and it's something the plant likes to do. And so you could easily see how a small fragment of this plant might be stuck on the bottom of a boat or in the live well water of a boat, and it might go missed. You may not see it. And so those are why some of our prevention steps can really help ensure that these things don't spread. And so here you can sort of see those roots I mentioned, these little fragments of plant that can just sprout roots and then grow into entirely new plants. And so this distribution map, the green is where you find Eurasian water milfoil, so you can see that it's in the Great Lakes, and it's also in quite a few of our inland lakes. And I know several of you on the call, when you introduced yourself, you mentioned that this might be something that had just arrived. Something good to know, and we're not going to go, like I said, through all of the different invasive species or native plants. We're just going to be talking about invasive ones. But we do, not all water milfoils are bad. I want to just point that out. We do have some native water milfoils. Northern water milfoil is one example of that. And it's a very good plant for us. So there's just some different identifying characteristics that you can tell the difference between the two, but you don't have to know that to do watercraft inspection. None of our inspectors have to be able to identify aquatic invasive species. This is just for your info, so you sort of know what some of the threats are out there when you're at the boat landing. Curly leaf pondweed is another aquatic invasive plant. It roots in the bottom like Eurasian water milfoil and grows up towards the surface. And this is one we've also had this one in our state for quite a while too. We think this one was introduced through ballast water, aquarium dumping, a variety of different ways it was likely brought. It has a very fun appearance, like a lasagna noodle type leaves with serrated edges, sort of like a serrated blade along the edge. And so it's sort of a fun ID tip. And one of our aquatic invasive species, it's easier to ID. And one of the unique characteristics it has is it will grow under the surface of ice. So it'll start growing way earlier than many other aquatic plants, specifically a lot of our native aquatic plants. And so some lakes might actually have curly leaf pondweed in their lake and not even realize it because it's growing under the ice, and by the time everyone's out and getting ready to visit and enjoy their lake, it's already done growing. And so it's a challenge. It exhibits many of the similar characteristics of Eurasian water milfoil. It can grow in large amounts. And it also, that third bullet you see there, it can release nutrients into the water column when it dies, which never helps the algae blooms. But there's many different plants that do that. Here you can see in this bottom right picture what you call the turion of the plant. So one of the ways that this plant spreads is it makes these hard little seeds that can drop to the bottom of the lake and sort of hang out there for quite a few months before they start to grow. And so it's just a different characteristic of these curly leaf pondweed. I think we had a question. I'm gonna pause here and see if we... So Eileen was wondering if folks should be concerned about the use of grabbers when picking up Eurasian water milfoil to identify it. So that's a good question. You know, Eurasian water milfoil does fragment very easily, and so you do have to be very gentle with the plant when you are trying to remove it. And we will talk about the recommendation for how inspectors interact with boaters and anglers this summer when removing things. But yes, it is definitely something you'd want to be in general careful with. It's I wouldn't say it's overly delicate and just falls apart in your hands, but it is something that if you were rougher with it and pulled it off, it could definitely break apart. And we can, if you have further questions about that, Eileen, if I don't address it later, let me know and we can talk further about that. Yeah, good question. Let's see if I can get my slide to advance again here. Okay, and so here's the distribution map for curly leaf pondweed. It's neon green in this one, but again, we see it in quite a few lakes and rivers in our state. Purple loosestrife, this is obviously, if you can tell from the picture, this is considered an aquatic / wetland plant. It's not actually under the water, but it grows in very wet areas. It can grow along the side of lakes, but oftentimes you'll see it along roads and ditches where it's really wet. And we like to mention this one because this one is an example of a plant that everyone felt was just beautiful and they wanted it back in their home gardens. And so it was imported from Europe quite a while ago for use in home gardening. And unfortunately, it is wonderful at reproducing. The amount of seeds that just one plant can produce in 1 year is incredible. And it doesn't rely just on seed, it also will spread vegetatively, so via roots. And it definitely is one of the species that it's lovely, but it's very good at reproducing, which means it's very good at outcompeting a lot of the native plants that we want to see in our wetlands and along lake shores. This map looks a little different. It's because we don't have, we have some purple loosestrife distribution data, but we don't track it in the same way that we do a lot of our other invasive species. And so this map gives you an idea of the hotspots. It's found in every county in Wisconsin. So don't let that fool you on the map. It is in every area, but the pink on this map still shows you the densest areas that we have of purple loosestrife. But we have a really wonderful purple loosestrife biocontrol program. Biocontrol meaning we have a control for the plant that is natural, and it's a weevil, a type of beetle. And I'll mention that in a little while, but it's a really successful program. And so if you do have a purple loosestrife issue in your area or would like to get involved, I can definitely connect you with the person who coordinates that effort. So here's our first non-plant invasive species, rusty crayfish. Rusty crayfish is a southerner, just like I am. He's native to the southeastern US. And it's a very easy crayfish to identify. And that, well, actually in both pictures, you can see this dark spot, but it's more clear in that bottom picture. My coworker Paul is holding up the rusty crayfish to take that picture, and you can see that dark brown spot on the side of its carapace, on the side of its, it looks like abdomen. And if you imagine taking your thumb and your pointer finger and dipping it in paint, just the ends of them, and then going and you pick up the crayfish the way you would want to get picked up. But way you would want to pick the crayfish up, pick it up by its carapace, not getting pinched. But if you imagine dipping your fingers in the paint and then picking up the crayfish, right where your fingers would hit or where they have those dark rusty spots. And you can really get the rust color from these two images. I have a example one in my office here, and they get very faded as they age, but you've likely seen a rusty crayfish. They're very, very common as well. I live here in Stevens Point, and my kids love to catch these things down at the park near our house. They are very good at reproducing, and they also act much more aggressively than our native crayfish, and so they're good at competing with them and getting the better burrow spots, getting the food more quickly, and just kind of bullying them around. They're kind of bullies. They also eat aquatic vegetation, but they're pretty messy about it. I heard one person, one limnologist one time referred to them as mini lawnmowers. They just come through and snip, snip, snip as they're eating. And so you can combine rusty crayfish and another aquatic plant, say Eurasian water milfoil, and have sort of a challenge on your hands. They might be aiding in Eurasian water milfoil spread or other things. So they definitely like to reproduce in very high numbers and outcompete our native species, like a classic invasive does. And here, this map looks a little different because rusty crayfish are also found in streams. So you'll notice that we have them in a lot of the streams in our state. Zebra mussels. This is one you might get some questions about at the boat landing more than others, because I think sometimes zebra mussels, some people have heard from more commonly. You can tell from the picture probably where they got their name. They've got those funny zebra-like stripes. These are one that are introduced probably through ballast water. So those large ocean-going vessels were sucking in water, and when they sucked in the water, they sucked in the tiny baby zebra mussels, which are called veligers. So they're basically microscopic. When they're very, very young, you would not be able to see them. They don't get super large even as adults. But they can reproduce in amazing numbers. Here you can see that females can produce over 1 million eggs in a season. And again, these are the zebra mussels. I had mentioned them in a previous slide, that they attach to any hard substrate. So any hard surface, even the stem of an aquatic plant would be hard enough. And they don't just kind of stick on. As you can see in this picture, they will glob on in large numbers. So they have no issue with their neighbors. they don't get this whole 6 feet of social distancing idea. They're just everywhere. It's a mussel characteristic. And so here you can see in this map, the blue is where we have our zebra mussels in the state, and much less common in the northern part of Wisconsin. We are having a few lakes that are finding some zebra mussels, but it's definitely one that we can work to keep out of the northern part of the state. Looks like I have a question. I'm going to take a break real quick here. Let's see. Okay, Eileen, I will take a look at that and address your question. She had another question about, she was explaining her first question about plant fragmentation. Perfect. Okay, so then zebra mussels, I believe our next slide, we kind of see the cousin of the zebra mussel. Yes, the quagga mussel. Now these pictures make the quagga mussel look quite a bit different from zebra mussels. They don't have that classic stripe in these images. It is not always that cut and dry that they look so different. They can be very hard to tell apart. But one of the differences with quagga mussels is they're much less picky about what kind of surface they attach to. I mentioned that zebra mussels like something harder. Quagga mussels will attach to pretty much any sort of soft substrate. They like soft substrate. They'll do harder substrate. They can survive at greater depths, a wider range of temperatures of water temperature. Basically, they're a bummer. They like to fill in the gaps left behind by zebra mussels. The good news is that we don't have them in any inland waters that we're aware of yet, but it's one of those that, just like zebra mussels, they're microscopic when they're young, could very easily be spread in water without realizing it, and they can cause major issues for water intake pipes, boats, motors, just like in that image on the bottom there. They will attach to anything that's left in the water. Oh, here we go. Here's our side-by-side image. There are some identifying tricks that you can use to tell the difference, but again, I don't think inspectors need to know this. This is just a FYI. We have some mussels in our state. We have some wonderful native mussels, and we unfortunately have 2 very bad non-native mussels that we want to try to keep from spreading any further. So like I said, that's the side-by-side, and that picture is a little bit deceiving. They're not quite as different looking as that suggests.
Hey, Erin, this is Amy. Before you go on to spiny water fleet, could you go back to the map? Penny Lyon had a question about Burnett County. She thought that there were some in Burnett County. Maybe you could address that.
Oh, thank you. I see. Okay, yes, Penny. I heard there was some report. How up to date? Yeah, great question. So this map is from March of this year. So this map is up to date. However, when they do discover a new invasive plant, animal, whatever it is, they report it into the system, and it's recorded in our online DNR system that exists. But it does take verification, and then it will also take time before it will trickle down into these distribution maps. So I would bet that you're correct and that they did have a find, but it's just not reflected yet on this map. But I apologize, I don't know off the top of my head, but we can definitely find that out. These maps are a nice visual, but there are lists on the DNR's website that you can look up by different species, or you could just look up your county and your lake and you can find what so far has been documented and found in each area. Yeah, really great question. Thanks, Amy. All right, spiny and fish hook water fleas. These are a very a major concern in the AIS world. The good news is we don't have water fleas widespread, the spiny and fish hook, I should say, widespread in our state. Again, the water flea family in general, not necessarily bad. We have some great little water fleas, but the spiny and fish hook ones are non-native, and they are a major problem for our, definitely the fish fry and younger fish, and they also affect and outcompete some of our native healthy zooplankton that we have. So they're a ballast water introduction. Again, these, so what we see in this top image, I'm gonna guess hopefully you can see my arrow, but the metal piece in this top image is the edge of a fishing pole. And so that white string thing is a fishing line, and you see all those spikes sticking out, and all those little spikes are individual water flea tails. So you can see water flea with the naked eye, but they are very, very tiny. And those dark spots are like their eye spots. So they are another species that globs together. They'll gum up fishing lines. They kind of form snotty globs in water. And so oftentimes that's how you won't necessarily always see them, but you'll notice them on fishing line. But because they are small, very easy to miss if they were in a live well or other container of water. So again, another reason we don't want to be spreading water from one place to another. And then this bottom picture, that's an individual spiny water flea that you can see there. We have them in 25 of our inland lakes and streams, but again, one that is not super widespread. But it's one that we really don't want to see spreading anywhere further. They are very difficult. In this form that you see on this slide, their adult form, they're not as difficult to kill. Drying out in the sun or a bleach spray would definitely eliminate them. But unfortunately, they have eggs called resting eggs, and those are very, very difficult to kill. Drying time, high heat, they can be impervious to a lot of those things. And so definitely one that we want to keep at bay. I didn't insert the specific numbers here, but the fuchsia colors on this map, you can see that they're in the Great Lakes. They do have them in some Madison area lakes and just a few up in our Vilas County area. And from what the reports I had heard, the ones in the Vilas County area, they suspect came from the UP. There are some waters in the Upper Peninsula that have spiny water flea, and they suspect maybe some people went fishing or boating down from the UP, and that's how Vilas County got its population. And one of the last species I'm going to cover is New Zealand mud snails. These are ones, maybe you've heard about these in the news or other things, and we do not have a widespread population of New Zealand mud snails, but they are of major concern out west. These teeny tiny little guys, that's adult form that you see in that picture, and yeah, that's a dime, so they're very, very tiny. They act a lot like zebra mussels in the fact that they attach to hard surfaces, and they like to be extremely close or on top of their neighbors. And so this species is one of the ones that was of a concern for people who go fly fishing out west on felt-soled waders. They can very easily be spread in mud. And so the few locations that they are found in Wisconsin are sort of areas that are known for more fly fishing. And so it's one of those audiences that we're trying to do a better job of reaching out to folks, letting people know like these are spread not just in water but mud too. And some of the information on the slide is just, they're amazing survivors. They have that classic hardy invasive species characteristic. They can live out of water for an extremely long time. They clone themselves. They don't even need to reproduce with another, male. So it's that for all these reasons and the fact that it's not widespread, they're considered a prohibited species. And I'll mention what the NR40 is, but it classifies our different invasives into categories. And this one is a prohibited because it's definitely of a concern, and we also don't have it very widespread in our state. And so we want to keep it that way. The map, it's harder you can see in the pink where we have New Zealand mud snails, but I did put the list there on this slide too. So again, it's creeks and rivers and places that people enjoy fishing that we've seen these so far. So that's the last of the species slides. I just want to take a break for a minute. If anyone has a question, please do share it in the chat box. It looks like we don't have any right now, but I'm just going to give a quick overview of a couple of the aspects of our AIS program that we have in the state and some of the regulations that exist, and then we'll sort of jump into our watercraft inspection program. So Wisconsin's Aquatic Invasive Species Program, our main goal is to prevent the introduction and limit the spread. That's what everyone is trying to do here with aquatic invasives, or AIS as we call them. We do want to focus on prevention, keeping things from getting into a lake or getting into an area, but we do also recognize the importance of containing things, because we're just in this situation that we do have some aquatic invasive species in the state. So it's just as important to not only prevent them from spreading further, but also to keep them where they are within the waters. And so we want to see watercraft inspection taking place on water bodies that don't have invasives, as well as Lake Winnebago and other water bodies that we know do have some, so that they can just stay in that water body. We also are always trying to find new partners and strengthen the partnerships that we had. I mentioned that we have many, many partners across the state now who are wonderful to work with. And we're all working towards trying to just increase everyone's awareness and understanding of why we care about aquatic invasive species and why we have the prevention steps and recommendations and rules that we have. This is just a quick list of our aquatic invasive species program elements, as I'm calling them. They're just parts of our program, and they're all honestly intermingled. It's not cut and dry. We do a lot of education and outreach in all of these different types of programs. But if you have any questions about certain ones of them, I'd be happy to talk a little bit more about them. But our watercraft inspection program is our main prevention and containment program in the state. One of the reasons we do watercraft inspection and put money towards it is because we get so much bang for our buck. We're able to, thanks to the help of yourselves and all the other citizens across the state, we're able to go out and conduct inspections in areas where we would never be able to reach with the limited number of staff people that are able to spend time on this. And this map, it's from 2017, so the data on it's old, but the locations and information is still accurate. So we have primarily about 90% of our inspectors are now funded by Clean Boats, Clean Waters grant money or contracts. And then we still have some wonderful volunteers who are out there working too. But if you kind of see, the blue dots are where we have our volunteers and the red dots where we have paid folks. And you know, one of the things that we're able to do if we do have our grant funded inspectors in certain areas or contract inspectors, Lake Winnebago, for example, we can see in a map. That's a huge lake, and it's just not a lake that we have a lot of volunteers willing to do watercraft inspection. And so instead, we're able to contract with the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh and hire students to help work on that water body in the summer. And so we're able to sort of leverage our inspection efforts in a variety of different ways, targeting certain water bodies where we don't have as many citizen groups, and then also helping focus on our northern Wisconsin lakes where we have some fewer aquatic invasives around. So it's a paired approach. So we talked about different species. We have our rusty crayfish there, curly leaf, our quagga mussel, Eurasian water milfoil. That bottom right image is a fish virus called viral hemorrhagic septicemia. If anyone was listening early to the call, I was playing fun aquatic invasive species music, and we have a whole song about that one we'll have to talk about later. But whether it's a fish virus, whether it's an aquatic plant or aquatic animal, all these different invasive species, the good news is that they all are prevented with the same steps. And so that's one of the good news for all of this. It's not that our rusty crayfish, we have to take these certain steps, but for these, it's a different set of steps. The good news is it's all the same steps, and so we can be consistent in the recommendations that we make to citizens and boaters and anglers across the state. So this is our AIS prevention message. Hopefully this is something you've seen before. Maybe you've seen it on the standard boat landing sign that we try to have out at every boat landing. It's a white sign with black lettering, and it has our Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers logo on it, but it's basically these key steps: inspect, remove, drain, and never move. So inspect your equipment, your boat, your trailer, and remove anything attached. And it was important to us that it not say remove all invasive species that are attached. Like, nope, we just take everything off. There's no need to identify it. You don't have to know whether or not it's mud or grass or Eurasian water milfoil, or, you know, and you can't always tell those things. And so we just need to keep things clean and take off what's attached. And then the third one is very important to draining all the water, not just from your equipment, but also from your live well. from your vehicle, just any kind of random water that you might have sitting in something. It's important to drain it because we really don't want to move water from one water body to another. That's one of the key things. And, you know, people are going to wonder, why is that important? Well, it's important for all those reasons we talked about regarding spiny water fleas or zebra mussels. These things are microscopic. You are not going to see them in water all of the time. And so it's just very helpful to us to not spread water from one place to another. Don't move plants or live fish away from a water body. Again, it's just like the water. We don't want to take plants or fish from one water body and put them in another. So say you have someone who comes off the lake fishing and they have fish in their live well. If they drain the water out of their live well and then just go home, that's, you know, 20 minutes, half hour away, that's fine. They are not moving live fish. Those fish are dead. They're abiding by our AIS regulations, and they're helping us prevent the spread of invasives. And then the last step, you don't see it quite as often because it's only applicable when people are fishing with live bait, but it's make sure to buy your minnows from a licensed Wisconsin bait dealer. And then we have some really specific rules about how to use leftover live bait. And I'm going to talk about those in a moment too. So inspect your boat and remove anything attached before you leave the boat landing. Drain all the water before you leave the boat landing, and not moving live fish away from the boat landing. So all of those are backed up now in our state by natural resource regulation. So these regulations I mentioned, they're called NR. NR stands for natural resource, and then 40 is the number of rule that it is. But that natural resource rule did two different things. Looking at the second bullet first, it required all those prevention steps that I just walked through. So it required them and made them law, which was really helpful because for a while we were just recommending people take these things, and it was helpful. I think our education program did a lot to motivate people, but it really helps also to have it backed up by a regulation too. And we've had that in place since 2009, I believe. The first bullet here talks about how I mentioned New Zealand mud snails are a prohibited species. So we looked at all the different invasive species, and we had experts get together in a working group, and they classified these different invasive species, aquatic invasive species, into prohibited or restricted. Okay, and so that was the other aspect of this rule, and that was very helpful to us because then we can tell folks, you know, you are not permitted to have this species in the state. We cannot order this online. You can't sell this in your store because of our concern about the fact of how invasive it is, and we don't have it widespread in our state. So I mentioned that I would walk through the live bait regulations, and I'll stop to see if we have any questions about those things. So in 2000, I'm losing track of time. I think it was 2007. No, maybe it was 2008. Well, anyway, quite a few years ago, 2007 through 2009 time period, but right when we were getting all these AIS regulations going and passed, we had that disease that I mentioned called viral hemorrhagic septicemia. And it was just a disease that affected a lot of different fish species. And we weren't really sure what species it would or wouldn't affect. We knew it was spread in water from fish to fish. And so everyone got very concerned, and we went, the fisheries program was very helpful in developing recommendations. But one of the things they required was that you could not reuse your live bait, because once you used it in a water body, if you went somewhere else, you would be then spreading whatever was in the water that you had used your live bait in to another place, right? Well, that is very difficult to ask people to do. It's very hard to ask them to buy brand new bait every single time they want to go fishing. And so we amended these live bait regulations. And so they exist as they are stated on this screen. And there is a really nice free publication, a brochure that is available that tells you more about fishing with bait, and it goes through these regulations. So I'll walk you through it, but I'll admit, because we had to amend these regulations, it is very challenging and can be confusing. So please ask questions after we go through this. So again, our whole goal with this is not moving water from one place to another. And so we do have that you need to drain the water from your boat and your live well and your equipment before you leave the boat landing. But you are allowed to keep up to 2 gallons of that water for your minnows. So the second bullet walks you through how that 2 gallons of water can be used, okay? And so ideally, if you buy minnows for fishing and you use them on Lake A, and you want to come back to Lake A and use them the next day, you can, no problem. If you want to go to Lake B, a different lake, it's important to not introduce any Lake A water into your minnows so that then it's then spreading to Lake B. So basically, you can take your leftover minnows away from the state water and use them again on another water only if you didn't add any lake or water or fish to your minnow container. And it's such a confusing wording, but again, the idea is you don't want to take water from one water body and move it somewhere else. And unfortunately, if you dip your minnow in Lake A, you know, then that minnow has all the things that are in Lake A. And so that's why we have these regulations as they are. The third bullet, I think I mentioned earlier, is that you can't transport live fish or fish eggs away from a state water. And we've gotten the question before, is like, does that mean I have to bash my fish over the head or something? And I'm like, no, it doesn't. If you drain all the water from your live well and leave your fish in there, you're following the rules. If you put your fish on ice, you're following the rules. So, you know, a fish out of water is considered dead. So that's all good, and you're following regulations. But I understand if people have questions about these live bait regulations, if they're fishing with live bait a lot, it can be very confusing to understand. And it depends on your lake and the water body that you're going to be inspecting on, whether or not it's even a water body that people commonly use live bait on, right? And so that's something else to be aware of too. I just want to pause here and check the chat box and make sure we don't have any questions or if anything's come up regarding this current regulation or any of the other prevention steps. Everybody hanging in there? Everybody's sleeping. It's okay. Okay, well, please let me know if you do have questions about this. I'll continue on here. So our next step is to talk more about the specific watercraft inspection program. Please again interrupt or let me know if you have questions. But through this section, I'd like just to sort of talk about our watercraft inspection efforts, a brief history of the program, and then I'm going to walk through the handouts that I did email out to everyone. And again, don't worry if you didn't get those handouts, we'll get them to you, and they're also all available on the Clean Boats Clean Waters website, which I would like to show all of you at the end of the training also. So we'll jump right in here. So this would be a great quiz if everyone was here around me at the training. So you see the boat trailer here, and you can see an aquatic plant hanging off the trailer. And maybe you know what that aquatic plant is now that we went through those slides. It's got lasagna-like leaves with kind of serrated edges. Any guesses? No? Curly leaf pondweed. But anyway, the important part of this, what do you actually need to know about aquatic invasive species to do inspections? You need to remember that we are making a difference. So actually going out, being at the boat landing and talking with people and having these engaged, informative conversations is very helpful. And in this picture, you see a typical summer for us. You see our inspector in their blue shirt there on the right, holding a clipboard. A clipboard's really handy to have for your data sheet. And they have just handed out what we call a Stop Aquatic Hitchhiker sticker. So you can see that sort of on the hitch of that trailer there. There's like a red stop sign symbol there. That's the federal campaign for stopping invasive species. It's called Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers. And they have some very nice materials. And one of the ones that we have used two key things. We have a brochure about invasive species that we share with our boaters. It walks through all the prevention steps, and we have a sticker. We're not going to be using either of those things probably for a lot of this summer, if not the entire summer, and I'll talk about that. But just this is a typical example of someone just having a conversation and offering a positive prompt to someone about preventing the spread of aquatic invasive species. But we'll walk through now what our inspectors are doing and who are our inspectors. So this is another quiz for everyone. Oh, I got a chat. Okay. Great question. Eileen is wondering if if our watercraft inspectors have to wear Clean Boats, Clean Water shirts, or can you use name tag lanyards or some other way to identify yourself? That's a really great question. Eileen, you do not have to have a Clean Boats, Clean Water shirt. We recommend that, and you'll see in a couple slides why, because this is a statewide program and everyone has that standard blue shirt. And so it's a really nice way to show people that you're part of this larger effort. They'll understand what group you're a part of. However, we also have Clean Boats, Clean Water stickers that are free that you could stick on something or a shirt. Or a lot of lake groups prefer to make vests and put the Clean Boats, Clean Waters logo on that. Some people do that, and that's okay too. I do recommend showing that you are part of an organization and that you are out there doing Clean Boats, Clean Waters and good work, and the blue shirt helps do that, but it's definitely not a requirement. So we can talk further about that too if you want to talk through ways where you could use the logo but not use the shirt necessarily if you're not wanting to do that. So Wisconsin's watercraft inspection program, it all began with this plant. Can you take a minute in the chat box and tell me what plant this is? Just guess. Guessing's fine too. Because again, this isn't an aquatic plant ID test or anything. It's just a fun. Yay, Eurasian water milfoil. Thank you. It's so good to know everyone's still out there. This is Eurasian water milfoil, and it's kind of a more classic, nice picture of Eurasian water milfoil because oftentimes it has a more reddish stem than the native water milfoil. So fun fact. But Wisconsin's watercraft inspection program, it all began with this plant, and thanks to the students right here in this picture. These students were in the Minocqua-Hazelhurst School District, so up in northern Wisconsin, and they were looking for a science project. And they had a nice person from the DNR Rhinelander office in their area come and talk with them and talk about invasive species. And so they started realizing that there was this plant growing in the lake near their school, but they noticed the plant grew funny, that it was actually kind of covering the surface of the lake. And so they connected up with their DNR contact and applied for a grant so they could have some money to spend some time talking with people at the boat landing and learning more about the plant. And they developed what they called themselves the Milfoil Masters program. They learned that this plant was indeed Eurasian water milfoil, an aquatic invasive plant that was not from Wisconsin, shouldn't be there, and had arrived because it unwittingly hitched a ride on a boater or angler's equipment trailer. No one had intended to bring it there, but there it was. And so when the students thought about how it had gotten to their lake, they decided the best way to tell other people about this plant would be to stand at the boat landing, because that's how people used the lake. And so the Milfoil Masters, they developed their shirts there, and they used the tagline Clean Boats, Clean Waters. They stood at the boat landings and they just told people about what Eurasian water milfoil was, and they shared this homemade brochure that they had made. I think they also had some aquascopes that they shared with people, so you could look they could look into the water and see what Eurasian water milfoil looked like when it was under the water. And they were just a really creative bunch of middle school students. And the next year, as this program caught on in the area, a lot of lake groups saw what these students were doing, and they said, well, gosh, can we do that in our area? And the program grew larger, and the state finally adopted the program in 2004 and just renamed it the Clean Boats, Clean Waters Watercraft Inspection Program. And I think this is such a cool story, period, but it's especially unique when I look at other states around us. There are other states that have watercraft inspection programs, and I've been trying to be in touch and learn from a lot of them during especially our current situation with COVID-19. It always strikes me as amazing of how unique our program is, and I'm very proud of the fact that ours is such a grassroots effort and driven by citizens. That's unique across the entire US as far as I can tell. The fact that we have so many people in Wisconsin who are willing to go out and are very passionate about keeping their water bodies healthy and protecting their waters and doing the work, putting in the effort. It's really cool. And so these students really get the thanks for starting the entire effort here. So as the program exists now, We have trained many thousands of people since 2004, and the exact number is actually difficult to pinpoint because I conduct trainings, but we also have other staff in other areas that conduct trainings, and I totally understand, again, this is part of our grassroots effort, that we have a lot of citizens who like to train themselves up and they go out and do work too. So we're always trying to help make sure we have a consistent message, but we have so many different volunteers, citizens, and staff. In this slide, you can see a staff person with one of the RC&Ds in our state doing some aquatic plant ID with some folks. And so we have a lot of different really great people engaged, but basically the goal that everyone has is to really educate and share information with the boaters and anglers in their area. And so these are just some of the different groups of folks who do watercraft inspections. We have citizens with lake groups. Some are volunteers, some are funded by Clean Boats grants. We even have some DNR staff who go out from time to time, and our local conservation wardens are always good to notify when you're doing watercraft inspection. They always want to support your effort and know that you're out there doing things. We have interns. A lot of them are students or college students in the summer, and we've worked with the Department of Workforce Development before too in doing watercraft inspection. So there's no end to the different partners we have. And so when you ask about whether or not we should wear the blue shirt, I always advocate for it because it just shows that you're part of this much larger effort. So whether you're visiting Walworth County or Vilas County or Burnett County, you understand that you're part of the Clean Boats, Clean Waters effort across the state. So for those of you who are with lake groups, if you're looking at recruiting volunteers, I just have a couple slides with just a few suggestions, and none of this is necessarily really new to folks, but especially when you're trying to figure out how to get the most bang for your buck when you're working with people, whether they're your volunteers or they're just your paid, your inspectors who help you with your Clean Boats, Clean Waters grant, but making sure to appoint people and not just phone calls, but like face-to-face talking is always really helpful. Again, not during the days of COVID-19, but hopefully you've got a little bit of a force who knows what the plan is for future years, if not this year, because there's a lot of different lake groups feel very differently from one point to another of whether or not they're going to do inspections, and we'll have that discussion too. But it's always good to have someone who's the main coordinator of efforts, so someone knows who to turn to ask questions and ask when they should be going out. And I always talk with people, think about what days are busiest at your boat landing. Oftentimes they're a weekend or certain times of the day. Maybe they're going to be really early in the morning because you have a lot of anglers going out and fishing. It really depends on your lake. And if you don't have a lot of volunteers or a lot of inspectors to go around, maybe just trying to focus on the few hours of those really highly busy times to try to get your information and out there and do some outreach. And retaining volunteers, these are some great folks in the Wapaka chain of links in this picture, but a lot of folks of our volunteers, maybe they don't even think they need a thank you. They just want to do it because it's their lake and they're really proud and want to protect their lake. But I think it's really nice to have some sort of celebratory event. And I can't tell you how much that I'm sure everyone wants to have a big celebratory event this summer, but we will eventually get back there and be able to celebrate all the great things we're doing. We've talked about even for our statewide efforts in celebrating all of our great citizens who are doing work. Usually we have a banquet at our Lakes Convention and we weren't able to do that. And so we're trying to come up with more creative ways to offer these recognitions. Maybe it's an online Zoom meeting, or there's a phone call, or it's in your newsletter to celebrate the names of the volunteers who worked with you this summer or your accomplishments. So everyone enjoys celebrating, especially during times like these. So I have a slide here that it's sort of got a brief, well, it's actually not so brief. It's kind of a long list of materials needed. And really it should be suggested materials because you don't necessarily have to have every single one of these things. I'll talk you through the things that I think are integral for doing your inspections. And then please let me know if you have questions. But so you'll notice I did put the Clean Boats t-shirt or sticker up there. And again, it's not because I really need to sell any shirts. It's more because I think it's important to identify yourself as part of a group. So if all of you have lake organization shirts or something that you want to wear to identify your efforts, by all means do that. But I think it's important to show that you're part of a group and have a purpose at the boat landing. Having a clipboard and your data sheet, the watercraft inspection report form. That's very helpful. So on your clipboard, you could also have your boat landing script, which I sent to everyone, but we'll look at that. So if you have, say you're working with some younger interns and they're going to be nervous for like the first week they're doing inspections, there's a script that can help walk them through their conversation with people at the boat landing. There's also a checkpoint list. You could give your inspectors a list of lakes that have different invasive species if they want to know that information. It's not something they have to know to do the inspections by any means, but you can kind of tailor this list to what you would like your inspectors to have on their clipboard. But for sure they should have the data sheet, and there's a prompt handout that I think that might be helpful, but they don't have to have. And then definitely some information on that clipboard somewhere that has a local safety contact. I often recommend that you always call your local law enforcement and conservation warden and just let them know, like, we're doing Clean Boats, Clean Waters inspections on our lake this summer. Just as a statement, we just want to let you know. So just in case people drive by the landing and they're like, who are those people hanging out the boat landing? They're probably causing trouble. I better call that in. You know, this way you've made the contact. Your local law enforcement knows what's going on. And then if they are able, because this varies in different areas, but if they're able to come by and check things out, or if you have a concern about an invasive species violation, I think it's more likely after you make that initial connection that these people might be able to back you up. So I think it's very important to have that information, both to let them know that someone's there, and importantly as a safety precaution, so that your inspector, because oftentimes our inspectors are working alone or maybe a couple at a boat landing, that they have a safe resource. They have a safe resource to call if they do need help or assistance. I put on here a camera, and it's kind of unnecessary because everyone has a camera on their phone now. So if you have your cell phone with you, again, that's a good safety precaution just to have. But it's also helpful if you do have someone who decides they're going to violate one of the AIS regulations, and it's something you want to report. Having a picture of the violation is very helpful when you're filling out that form. Let's see, the plastic bags and marker. You might be wondering, what on earth is that about? This is maybe something that we're not going to need to worry about as much this summer, but oftentimes we have people when they're out on the lake, after they meet you as they're going onto the lake, you're now their new AIS expert. You're their main resource, right? And so you might have people who are like, I found this on the lake, I don't know what it is. And so if you have some Ziploc bags, you can put these plants in them, zip them up, label with where you found them, and then just drop them off at the local DNR office or to your local AIS coordinator, and they can help you identify something. This summer, because we're going to want to keep our 6 feet of social distancing space between inspectors and the boaters and anglers and things like that. I think everyone's just going to appreciate some additional space this summer. You might have fewer people coming up to you, but it can be helpful to have those Ziplocs, because say you're at the boat landing and some plants wash up and you find anything that you think is suspicious, it's never a bad idea to put it in a bag, label it, and then just make sure you get it to the staff person or the DNR office in a quick enough manner that the thing in the bag doesn't turn into goo, because that's easy to happen too. So that's not something you have to have. It's just something I've had some inspectors tell me is really helpful to them. I'm going to pause for a minute. Are there any questions so far? Okay. Please let me know if any come up further. I'll keep going here. And so I like to break watercraft inspection, like what exactly are my duties this summer as a watercraft inspector, whether or not I'm working for the lake group or I've been hired by the local nonprofit to do inspections. What am I supposed to do? Your key goal here is to inform and educate boaters and anglers about our prevention steps. That's your number one message. Number two, we usually phrase it as performing watercraft inspections, but it's really helpful to engage the boater or angler in checking out their boat. So as you walk around the boat and point out areas to them, engaging them in this activity and encouraging them to take that behavior is really helpful. And again, I acknowledge this summer that might be more challenging. You know, you may not feel comfortable and the person walking around someone's boat, you may not have the space to do that and to honor that 6 feet of distance. And I completely understand that. I think just our presence at boat landings, if your lake group decides to go out to do inspections, will be a nice reminder to folks to take those AIS prevention steps. And I will talk through that when we get to those guidelines. The third thing, which is sometimes the reporting of the data is the less fun part, but the collecting and reporting data is really helpful because it gives all your lake group in your area sort of a baseline of information that's been collected on your boaters, like whether or not where they had been like what water body they had last visited. We'll walk through the data sheet. It'll give you an idea of how many people you contacted in a summer, and it very much helps me out from a statewide level, because then I can take this information and say, look at all of the hours and the time these citizens across the state are spent conducting watercraft inspections. These are the number of people they've contacted. We would never have reached that many people with our AS prevention message in any other way. Like for this small amount of money that we're putting into the program, we get a huge return. And so that data is very, very helpful to me. And we'll walk through that data form. As I mentioned, this is the key message that our inspectors share at the boat landing. We've had focus groups conducted on how to do AIS messaging probably 5 to 10 years ago. And so we had different mock-up designs of posters that we could have at boat landings. And so some of them are really beautiful. They'd have a beautiful lake picture, and it said something like, preserving the lake you love, or something like that. And then there was another one that we tested with another group that was a picture of a grandparent and grandchild fishing together, and it said something about preserving the lake for the next generation. And so we had different messages. And then we had another one that just had these prevention steps. And it kind of surprised me, but most of the boaters and anglers that we talked to, they said, you know, those look nice, but we just need you to tell us what you want us to do. So just putting those prevention steps out there in front of us, that's the message we need to see. And I was like, oh, I would have assumed like maybe something that pulled at your heartstrings might be more effective, but it's for that reason that we try to emphasize consistently these steps in this way: inspect, remove, drain, and never move. And so that's what the data sheet that the inspectors use in the summer, that's the message that walks you through sharing with the boaters and anglers. So the contact that someone has at the boat landing, there are inspectors having a positive greeting when you first see a boater or an angler, you know, introducing yourself, saying, hey, I'm with the local lake group, or I'm working for this association this summer. Asking if you can ask them a few questions, sharing some of the prevention steps and kind of asking them if they've heard of them, and then involving the person in a watercraft check. You'll notice I crossed out that last bullet because we usually would recommend to our inspectors that they offer people a sticker or a brochure or something like that at the end of their conversation, and we're not going to recommend that for this summer. And like I said, I promise I'll walk through those guidelines at the end of this section too. I'm going to pause because I think we might have a question. There is a question about what permissions does a lake association need in order to post information at a state forest boat landing? That is a great question. This has come up in past years. It's very important to know who owns the boat landing that you're going to be conducting inspections on. And so once you identify who that is, getting in contact with that group and letting them know that you're going to be conducting watercraft inspections is important. And so for this specific instance, if it's a state forest boat landing, you need to contact the local state forest office in your area. So if you know, just depending on the state forest, contact that specific office and let them know your interest, and work with them to get the information or the permission to conduct the watercraft inspections at the landing. And for that specific question, I would be happy to help facilitate that conversation. If you're not sure where to start, let me know and I'd be happy to do that. Great question though. So one of the handouts I sent ahead of time was this data sheet. So it's called the Watercraft Inspection Report Form. And I wanted to have it blown up on the screen large so that we could all see it and walk through it more thoroughly. Okay, and so if you've ever filled a data sheet out before, it has some similar characteristics to another typical data sheet. It needs some just key basic information. We want to know who's filling out this data sheet. We want to know what the day and time is. We want to know where you are. And so we ask for a water body name, county, because there's lots of, you know, mud lakes and fish lakes and blue lakes and all sorts of things. But so we want to know water body, county, and then your landing location. If you need help determining that, we can do that. Most landings have sort of a common name, and typically that's where you would put the common name for your landing. The other information at the top is the total hours spent. And so you could put how many hours that you spend at the boat landing inspecting. So if you're working from 9 to noon one day, you know, you would put how many hours of that was spent paid, and then say you just stayed another extra half hour or something, volunteering your own time, whatever, you would split that information into that area. In most cases, people are going to be all paid hours or all volunteer hours, but you can do it however it fits your need. And so that's the basic information, and actually our data sheet is designed that you can fill that information out on your computer. You can type in your name and your location. If you know what dates and times you're planning to go, you can actually fill that part in ahead of time and print it if you'd like. Otherwise, filling it in with a pencil works perfectly well. And then that next part is the data collection portion while you're at the boat landing. And so you'll see that first section, it says boat was entering or leaving. And that means, was the boat entering the water or was it leaving the water? And you can check one of those boxes. And you'll notice it has rows and columns on this sheet. And this data sheet is intended for you to complete it one row at a time. And so you'd look at the first row and you'd say whether or not you're talking to people as they enter the lake or leave the lake. And sometimes I get the question, well, which is better? You know, should we talk to people as they arrive or as they leave? I would say whatever works best for the flow of traffic and for your water body. If you are on a lake that doesn't have any invasive species, you might want to talk to people as they're entering the water. But perhaps your landing is not set up very well for that. Maybe it's more set up for when they have to, maybe there's a spot that a lot of people put their boat on their trailer and then pull up and away from on the side of the landing, away from that ramp. And maybe then it's a better time and the person has a moment while they drain their water and get their boat hooked up. Maybe that's a good time to make your contact. It really might depend on the landing you're on. Either way, it's a very helpful thing to have this conversation, whether people are leaving the water or entering the water. So I'd be happy to talk with you about your specific instance if you have questions, but it's a good thing to think about. And in some cases, you might be doing both. You know, you might not have a landing that's super busy, and so you might just talk with people, and you do not need to have the exact same conversation with someone twice in a row, you know, the same day. You know, if you see them, you can just wave and ask if they, you know, need anything, or you can kind of watch to see if they're taking any prevention steps and offer assistance if needed. So with reminding them of steps or why something's important. But again, our whole point of being at the boat landing is having a positive interaction with people, but also encouraging them to take these prevention steps. So that boat was entering or leaving, that's something that you would mark. You don't have to ask the boater that, obviously, you observe that. And then you'll see that next section is labeled questions to ask boater. And it's in that part where you can ask some questions. And so this form was designed to help lead you through the conversation with the boater or angler. You don't have to follow the form in this order. If you're able to make your own conversation with people and collect this same information in your own way, I completely support that. So we thought a good way to start out would just to be ask people, have you been contacted by a watercraft inspector this season already? You know, maybe you've already talked to someone in a blue shirt like me before. And that gives the person the opportunity to say yes or no. One of the things we've heard from some parts of the state where some boaters were like, well, I feel like I'm being harassed because the person talks to me over and over and over again. And I said, okay, well, this would be a good way if we have them ask this question. You can get a feel if someone says, oh my gosh, I was just at this lake yesterday and I heard it 3 times. You can say, oh, great, okay. Well, are you willing to answer a few questions for me? That's the next question. If the person's like, oh, no, please, I don't. You can say, okay, thanks for your time. this is their opportunity to say yes or no. Again, this is to help you have a positive conversation with someone. Are you willing to answer a few questions? We don't hear, majority of people don't say no. So that's a good thing, I think. When we first added that question on this data sheet, I wondered if that would be the case, and it's not. So it's good to know that. So the next question, was your boat used somewhere else during the past 5 days? Was your boat used during the past 5 days on a different water body? So why might we be asking this question? This is really to benefit you. It's sort of a brief risk assessment question for you. If someone says, well, yes, I was somewhere else in the past 5 days, then we say, oh, well, where were you? And you can show them the sheet. I'm like, we're not taking down your private information on here. We're just curious of where you were. One of the reasons this helps you out is because you might be aware that the lake down the road from you might have an invasive species that your lake doesn't, for example. And so this would allow you to have a conversation with like, oh, well, I'm so glad we talked, because actually, you know, Black Oak Lake down the road has this invasive species, and it's really important to us that we not take that and we not get that one here. And here's how that invasives gets spread. Did you know that it's important to inspect our boats to drain water? And so that kind of helps you guide your conversation. You'll see there's a place for water body name, county, state. And there's a don't know box. There's people who aren't going to know, and that's fine. The last box for you to enter data into, it says number of people contacted. And what we want to see in that box is just the number of people who heard your message. If you are mainly talking to one adult, but it's a family of 4, say 2 adults and 2 kids, for example, and they're all kind of listening, that counts as 4 contacts. And so that's what you would enter into that box. The last section of this data sheet is sort of meant to help you have your conversation with the boater. So after the boater has said they're willing to answer a few questions, then this is meant for you to be able to just read it, but again, you can make the conversation your own. But you can say, you know, we have laws in Wisconsin that require boaters to take these steps when leaving the boat landing. We ask that people look at their boats, inspect their boats, trailers, and remove anything attached. We added the follow-up question, have you heard of this before? And really it was just to encourage inspectors to engage the boater in a brief conversation. So the boater didn't just feel like they were having these rules read to them or being lectured about them. We thought this would be a good opportunity because there's many people who haven't heard about this before, right? All of us might have our heads in lake preservation and aquatic invasive species, but we completely acknowledge that a lot of people don't. And so this is our opportunity to have a brief constructive conversation with people about it. And so then the next, that was steps 1 and 2, inspect your boat, remove any attached plants. Have you heard of this before? Step 3, drain all the water from boats, vehicles, equipment. Do you have any questions about this? And so those first 3 steps are the main steps that we would like to be mentioned to all boaters and anglers. If you do run into an angler, we encourage you to also mention step 4, because we have learned that when we tell people to drain all the water from their boats and equipment, people don't always equate that with draining water from the live well. And so we added this 4th step, drain water from your live well and any containers holding your catch. And then we just followed that up with, well, this is a relatively new law. Were you aware that this was required? Again, just a follow-up question, not meant to pinpoint people saying, well, you should know this. You're like, oh, it's kind of new. Had you heard of this before? So you can really follow it up with any sort of conversational question that you would like. And then lastly, do you use live bait? If you do run into someone who is fishing with live bait, we created this more concise bait message that the inspector can read to the angler. And so it says, if live bait comes in contact with lake or river water, it can only be used on that same water body or discarded in the trash. And then we put in parentheses what live bait was considered. And then a follow-up question, do you have any questions on this law? It can be confusing. And again, it's meant to share information with people, but not make people feel like they're being put on the spot. And you're going to see, you notice after each of these steps, there's a little parentheses that says see prompt. I'm going to show you that sheet next. that prompt sheet I made after we created this data sheet, just in case you or you have another inspector would feel more comfortable with having sort of a cheat sheet, like, oh, why is it important we drain all the water? I don't remember. And so you can look at that cheat sheet and you can see the logic behind it. And then you also can put notes for yourself that say, well, it's really important because the county right above us has 3 water bodies with spiny water flea, and we really don't want that. And so it can help give you some notes for when you're having the conversation at the boat landing with the boaters or anglers. I want to just take a break because this data sheet is the main sheet that our inspectors use, and make sure there aren't any questions.
Hey, Erin, this is Amy. There were a couple of questions.
Oh, yeah.
One specific to this data sheet, kind of. What if you have a boater or angler that doesn't want to follow the steps? You might cover this later, but.
Yeah, so what if you have a boater or angler who maybe they said they're willing to talk to you, but they're like, yeah, I'm not doing that. That's a great question. So some of your approach might depend on who you're working with this summer. So make sure you talk about this with, say, if you're working for Door County or another lake group, make sure, because some groups have opinions on how they want you to handle it when people don't want to follow the prevention step. Because you do have the option to fill out a violation report form. And I am going to walk through that form in a little bit. But if you do have someone who's not following the prevention steps, you can just let them know that you're just there sharing information and it's really important. And you just have one of those people who've like, I've heard it before and I'm not doing it. And you can clearly see that they have water on their live well, or they have plants attached and they're driving off. You can take a picture. You can write down their boat registration number on the form, because that's one of the key things that we would need just to report that information. But I'll show you the violation report form. It has lots and lots of blanks on it. And the point of it is to collect as much information as possible. But I completely understand, and law enforcement understands, you would never actually get all of that information probably in one sitting. But the boat registration number and a picture with a description of what the situation was is helpful, because then that information can be reported to the local, you can report it to local law enforcement, but what we usually recommend is you report it to the conservation warden in your area. And again, this is why it's good to connect with this person when you set up your Clean Boats, Clean Waters program, just to let them know you're doing this, because those are the people who can follow up with it usually more readily, because it is a natural resource regulation. But I'll talk more about the violation report form, and then let me know if I don't address the question thoroughly enough for you.
The other couple of questions that I got, Erin, were referring to some like signs and stickers. So I guess you will probably cover some of those publication type things later, yes?
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
Yes, I will. Good question. I'm sorry. My I know that chats, I don't have any questions in my chat box, so I think it's totally fine if you want to send questions directly to Amy, but I apologize, I didn't see those. Any other ones that have come up with regarding the data sheet or other things?
So another one that just came into me, Erin, is the Burnett County newsletter indicates that you can reuse live bait if it's from Wisconsin bait dealers. How would you know if it's from a neighboring state, and does it matter?
Yeah, good question. You usually cannot tell. That's why some of these live bait rules are so great. So good question. You cannot tell if your bait is from a licensed Wisconsin bait dealer. When you purchase it, you can tell, but obviously when someone comes to a boat landing, you can't tell where they got their bait from, and we're not expecting you to know that. So we just encourage anglers who are going to be using live bait to purchase them from a licensed Wisconsin bait dealer. And there is information on the DNR's website. If people have questions on how to figure out who that is, let me know if that would be useful to you, and I can find that for you. I would be interested in seeing the wording on the Burnett County sheet, because likely what they mean is that it can be reused on the same lake. If no lake or river water has been added, then it can be taken elsewhere. It's like I said, it's that same funny wording. But an inspector does not need to know whether or not it came from a licensed Wisconsin bait dealer. We don't expect our inspectors to enforce any laws. So you just can share the information and why it's, you know, important. Are there any other ones, Amy, that I can help answer now?
Nope, that's all I had.
Okay, well, let me know if I don't address the publication question to the degree they wanted later, and we'll get that. All right. So one of the handouts, so I can't give you all handouts and walk you through them, but I wanted to bring your attention to a couple of the things that I shared ahead of time and that we have available for you. One is a 3-page handout. It's from our Watercraft Inspector Manual that you do not need a huge copy of. It's available on our website. You can download it and read the whole thing and it'll be great. But I wanted to kind of point out the key handouts from that manual that you could just print out the few pages of or have available to you. So this one is helpful in just reminding you, you know, I walked through that data form with you, but say, hey, I don't remember everything Erin said about why we have this or how to use it. That's what this document does for you. It can walk you through preparing the form before you do inspections, and it can walk you through using the form. And again, if you did not get that handout and you haven't let me know yet, do let me know. I'm going to back up to this form so that I can show you this very last part. And so we walked through this form and how to use it. And then every time you talk to a new boater, you're going to be putting information into a new row. So every time you have a new contact with someone at the boat landing during that day and time, you'll put it in here. And you can use as many of these data sheets. If you have a really busy day, if you need to use 3 or 4, that's absolutely fine. You'll see in the bottom right-hand corner, we have sheet blank of blanks. You can say sheet 1 of 3, sheet 2 of 3, you know, at the end of your day. You can staple them together. And then what we ask folks to do is to total the column on their sheet. And so for each column, say for this very first one, boat was entering, you would count the number of check marks or X marks or whatever mark you'd like to put in that dot to indicate the person was entering. You'll count how many of those there are, and you'll put that in the totals row at the very bottom of the data sheet. If you have more than one data sheet, enter those totals, and then on the very last data sheet, please enter the totals for all 4 of those data sheets, if that makes sense. Okay, so you're going to have one large total on the very last sheet, because you'll use one sheet per water body, per landing, per day. So if you're going to inspect, say, at 2 different landings in one day, you're just going to want to use 2 different data sheets then, because again, remember, we had to indicate what the landing location was. There's also a small comments section. Feel free to enter whatever you would like in there, because that can then be entered. You can type in those sorts of information into the database later. Happy to answer more questions about the data form, but again, this sheet is a good cheat sheet for later, so you can kind of refresh yourself. And so how are we supposed to use this information? Let's see, we got a question here. Oh, Eileen, thank you for your question about finding Clean Boats, Clean Water stickers. I will definitely help you with that when we're done with the training. Perfect.
Erin, Darcy had a question about asking if they can use the previous version of the sheet where it includes the strongly agree / disagree with boater understanding.
Darcy, I would encourage you to use this version. There is no difference between this version and that other version you spoke of, with the exception of that one question. So if you're worried because you don't have access to a printer or something and you have a huge pile of those, that's fine. I get it. I would just mark out that last question and use those data sheets. That's fine. Ideally, you'd have the latest version, but as long as you're not trying to collect information on that last question and enter it, then it's not a problem. I know I have limited access to a printer nowadays too, so you got to make it work when you need to. And Okay, so I wanted to discuss the next handout that I had shared, the prompts handout that sort of led you through how to use the data form. It's meant to be sort of a cheat sheet for the inspector. It reminds you of why steps are important, but it also allows you to sort of localize the information that you're sharing at the boat landing. So I'm going to show it to you here. So this is what we call our prevention step prompts cheat sheet. So you'll see on the data sheet that I had shared earlier, during the prevention steps section, there were different, we referred to C prompt 1, C prompt 3. And so you'll see we numbered them. So steps 1 and 2, that's inspect and remove. Step 3 is drain your boat and equipment. Step 4, drain live wells and containers holding catch. And so again, you do not have to use this form. We were just trying to add a resource for people that wanted to be reminded of why are these things important. And I think a lot of times this is more helpful for when we have our students who might be from another part of the state and they're working in a new area in a new lake, and so they like being able to take notes and say, okay, these are the aquatic invasives that are of major concern in this area, and this is a new area to me, so I'm going to write down some of these things that that are new, and so it helps them remember what things to focus on. Oh goodness, I'm sorry about that. I was trying to click the chat box. All right, let's see. Oh, thank you, Amy, for sharing that. Okay. Let me know if there's questions about that prompts handout. Lastly, why do we ask you to collect data? I sort of mentioned this, but it does really help to be able to have some sort of end of the year thing summary to show your efforts in your local area, but it really helps from a statewide perspective to be able to say, like, here's all the information that we've collected over the year. And we have a website that I'll show all of you too, where you can see statewide data totals. So for 2019, we had 147,000 boats inspected over that. Over 300,000 people were contacted with these prevention steps in this Clean Boats, Clean Waters message. And we spent almost 90,000 hours conducting inspections across the state. And we can look at that data for a county, for a basin, and for a landing. And this is that website I mentioned I would show you. And so you do not have to log into any database to see this. This is on the DNR site, and I link to it from the Clean Boats, Clean Waters site. And the drop-down menu at the top there is where you can change to a county or a different area and view the totals for your state. But you can see how long we've been collecting data on our watercraft inspections. It's important to have long-term data. And even when it's self-reported like this, it's still really useful for us to have. Another handout, because we're not going to be able to walk through swims one-on-one today, I wanted to give you a handout that would walk you through how to enter that data that I just told you about, how to fill out your data sheet and how to total it. We ask that you enter your data into a database called SWIMS. It stands for Surface Water Integrated Monitoring System. SWIMS is just a lot easier. But it is a place where all of Wisconsin's water data goes into. And so it's a really cool website. We've got ice on, ice off data in there from long ago, from the 40s or something like that. And so this watercraft inspection data is just another layer that is entered into this database. So this handout walks you through how to get a username, a password, and then how to enter that data. I'll also show you on the Clean Boats, Clean Waters website where there are instructions, but I just want to make sure you had that handy for you. So here's a quick quiz, and we'll talk about the violation report form. I like to show this picture. So this truck and trailer that has quite a few plants on it is parked at the boat landing. So say you arrive to do your daily watercraft inspection and it's parked there, there's nobody or a boat in sight. What can you do? And so I think it's just as a good reminder, since I can't quiz all of you easily in this format, but just to talk about the fact that say you arrive at the boat landing and you see this, you can't just fill out a violation report form, can you, right? Because you didn't see anything happen. You don't know, maybe those plants came out of the lake as they were launching their boat. Maybe it's one of those lakes where a lot of plants wash up at the landing, right? And so all they were doing was launching their boat. But what you could do is when someone comes to back their trailer back into the water and retrieve their boat, you could offer and say, hey, like, I think it might be important to clear those plants out of there? Or how can I help you? Or just making a contact with these people. So it's just good to point out, you need to think about the fact that watercraft inspectors are not responsible for enforcing the law. We just have the option to fill out a violation report form if that's something that the group you're working with this summer feels comfortable with you doing and recommends you doing. And I'm going to show you that form right here on this sheet. I think I mentioned this before, but you just basically want to collect as much information as possible. The boat registration number is really helpful. A vehicle license number, that's great. But boat registration usually can help at least a letter or something be sent to the person who that boat is registered to. Just a reminder like, hey, here's our steps, or even more if follow-up can be done if need be. At the bottom of the form, there is a number 1-800-TIP-WDNR. That's where you can go you can report a violation, and it is a general number, but they recommend calling that general number because then they ask about your location and then they immediately forward you to your local warden. I did put a box on the bottom of the form though where you could put the phone number for your local warden and your local law enforcement information, so it can be helpful. And like I mentioned before, informing your local law enforcement and warden of your inspection plans and having a picture of a violation are just two important things to keep in mind and know that they can be helpful. Okay, that was a lot of information. I do want to cover a last couple of things in the time that we have. We have left just to walk through what the guidelines are for inspections this summer. You know, how has COVID-19 affected our Clean Boats program, and then what watercraft inspection video scenarios we have available. And I wanted to show everyone the website. Would you like a quick 5-minute break? I know this has been a long time to sit and listen to me drone on about watercraft inspections. So would you like to put in the chat or unmute and let me know what your thoughts are? Could you use a quick break, or how's everybody feeling? All right, some people seem like they're okay. So we'll just see if we can power on since we're close. Feel free if you need to get up and stretch. I get it. We'll keep going since we're getting close. Thanks, everyone. Okay, thank you. All right. So I apologize, this is blurry. I promise my handout's not blurry. I took a quick photo. I wanted to show you. So we did develop some guidelines for our watercraft inspection program this summer. It exists in a PDF format, so it looks like this on one side, and then it has this nice table on the other side. I just want you to know that exists. I'm going to walk through that with you in slides instead because it's easier and clearer. Yeah, watercraft inspection in COVID-19. So our watercraft inspection program is supported by the state of Wisconsin, but all of our inspection activities are completely voluntary. And so we created some guidelines because I did hear from some inspectors that they would definitely be going out and doing inspections. And I've heard from some other people that they're not sure they want to go out and do inspections. And I completely agree and understand both of those situations. And so what I wanted to do is offer options if you do want to go out and conduct inspections. Here are some ways I feel like we could be the safest about doing it. However, I cannot require or keep you from doing inspections. I can't require that you go out and do them or stop you from doing them. So I think the important thing is for you to work with your organization and talk about what you feel is the safest. I think everyone's probably aware, but the Department of Health Services and the CDC still recommend that certain groups of people, like people over the age of 60 and people who have underlying health conditions, are still very vulnerable, and they should make sure to protect themselves and stay home. I just wanted to share that information because we have so many wonderful citizens in the state, and I just want to make sure everyone's making decisions with the best information possible right now. Our watercraft inspection program recommendations are based on the Governor's Bounce Back Plan and the National Plan for Opening Up America. So we decided to offer a phased approach. our guidelines right now is to, again, these are just recommendations. All lake groups are going to do something that they feel fits their needs, but we recommend waiting until we start phase 1 of the governor's bounce back plan. If you're curious whether or not we've started phase 1, you can go to the Department of Health Services website and check the status of that. Basically, I think the Department of Health Services just came up with some general metrics, like we want to see a decrease in cases of COVID-19 for 2 weeks, or we want to see a decrease of cases among healthcare workers and some things like that. So on that PDF handout I shared, I actually linked directly to that site and how you can find that information. And so please check that out. I think it's good information to know if you haven't heard it before. But just, you know, that's what we based our information on. And so phase 1, 2, and 3 follow this general idea that as we go through the phases, we will be kind of opening things back up to larger groups. So I recommend phase 1, maybe we start inspecting at landings with 10 people or less, so just not as busy places. Phase 2, groups of 50 people or less. And phase 3, hopefully we can sort of return back to our normal activities. Here's our basic guidelines, and I don't think any of this is probably news to anybody, or new information, I should say, to anyone. Maintaining 6 feet of distance is going to be really helpful to boaters and anglers and inspectors. We're not going to be handing out materials this summer. That does not mean you can't order them if you want to have them for yourself or whatever purposes, but I just don't recommend our inspectors handing out materials for obvious reasons. You know, we need to keep our distance. We also are not recommending that we assist boaters with plant removal. I think using the plant removal tools in certain circumstances could be an option, but in general, we're not going to recommend that you approach people and try to help them remove plants when you're close, because that would then, it could potentially get you closer to that 6 feet of distance, if that makes sense. If there might be a landing where you just cannot maintain the 6 feet of distance when you're out at the landing. And so in that case, I recommend you just remove yourself somewhere safe where you can watch the situation, just be a friendly presence. And again, just rely on the fact that you have your Clean Boats, Clean Waters shirt or sticker or whatnot to identify the fact that you're just promoting AIS awareness and prevention. We recommend having a cloth face masks. We do have 2 free masks available to order for all inspectors. The order is on the Clean Boats, Clean Waters online store. I'd be happy to show everyone where that is if you've not seen that. So you can order 2 free masks to use during inspections. And we don't expect, obviously, our inspectors to wear this mask 24/7 when no one's at the boat landing. It's just when you have some folks around, I think it's a nice courtesy. And I think it's a good idea just to have it available to you for safety purposes. Washing and sanitizing your hands. You know, yep, we still need to make sure that we have access to hand sanitizer, just a good idea. In the last bullet, some groups do this more than others, but for example, some groups might just have one clipboard that they pass because they have one boat landing, and so all their inspectors just, you know, have the same clipboard that they use. This summer, it's best not to share materials, obviously. That's one of those logical ones, but just to keep in mind and transfer that over to your monitoring and inspection activities as well. I have developed a design for a Clean Boats, Clean Waters yard sign. So this is like a corrugated plastic sign on metal stakes, similar to like the political signs you might see in yards and in your area, or advertising craft fairs or whatnot. And we had some of our AIS staff actually recommended these. They thought it just might be helpful to have at the boat landing. So we have a yard sign designed, and we are in the process of ordering some of these signs. If this is something that you would be interested in having at your boat landing while your inspector is conducting inspections, let us know, and we'll try to get one of those to a region near you. Because of the size, we're not able to ship the signs to specific people, but we're hoping to have a sort of a regional drop-off place, so that if you would like one, you could pick one up safely and do that. So I'll be sharing more information about that. Sorry, my phone's ringing here in the background. And then the last thing is, since we're not sharing stickers or brochures with people at the boat landing, well, then how do we answer questions they might have? And so I think directing people, if they have a lot of specific questions about spiny water flea, like they want more info than you're able to provide them, say, hey, just go to the Wisconsin DNR site. Their homepage has a huge search bar. And if you can enter that keyword or other keywords like AIS or invasives, and you can find a lot of helpful information. Are there questions about, before I go to the next slide and wrap up here, are there questions about these guidelines or anything else?
I have a question, Erin.
Yes.
I shared the guidelines with our inspector intern, and they asked, their first question was, do I have to wear the mask all the time? And so I told them that we discuss it and talk about, how we can be safe while still doing our job. So I just didn't want to give her a hard answer. But what are your thoughts on that? Can you elaborate maybe on the appropriate use of masks on the landing?
Sure. I think if an inspector feels most comfortable wearing their mask 24/7, then I go with that. That's great. That's not what I expect at all. I think if it's not a busy landing, if maybe you have some people fishing, but they're on the complete other side of the landing, way far away from you. And again, boat landings are all come in different sizes and shapes. I don't think that's a concern. I think it's more when people come in close proximity of you, or when you're having your conversation with a boater and angler. I think it's an important courtesy to have access to. Like I said, I can't require everyone to wear a mask or not wear a mask, but I think it's something good for them to have. And so I would just say probably just use your common sense. If you'd be, we recommend wearing masks going out in public places, and if you feel like there's enough public at the place you're at, then I feel like that would be a suitable time to wear your mask. So
thanks. I think that'll be helpful in explaining what good judgment would be. So thanks.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. And granted, I'm sharing these guidelines, and I understand that there are many counties or municipalities that might have their own guidelines for their areas. And I think it's good for everyone to be aware of what those are too. So yeah, good question. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap up here, and then we'll look at our website. So from some of the last things that I'd like to share, another handout, we have a handout, it says boat landing message, but basically what this is, it can be a script for the boat landing. So if you have some brand new inspectors who, since we can't do some role playing today, but would like to imagine what it's like talking with someone at the boat landing, this handout actually, it's a 3-page handout, and I believe the second and third page are kind of a script that would take you through, like, you could stand in front of a mirror and practice having this fake conversation, which might completely feel silly, but it will give you an idea of like what it feels like to talk with someone about this. The other resource we have are our video scenarios that are online. I'm gonna pause my PowerPoint here and see if I can share the website with all of you. I was playing my music earlier. Okay, so I'm going to go to our Clean Boats homepage. I hope some of you have visited our Clean Boats, Clean Waters webpage. It looks like this. We're part of UW-Stevens Point, so we always have this purple banner up here, and then here's our program extension links. And then if you ever want to find the Clean Boats, Clean Waters program, it's Clean Boats, Clean Waters here. If you click that logo, it'll usually get you to this homepage. And we have some great buttons here on the side to help you. One of them, just since we were just talking about ordering masks and things, if you click order supplies, that will take you to our Clean Boats, Clean Waters store. And here's where you can access that. Another button that's helpful is the resources button. This is where you're going to find the video scenarios and a lot of these handouts that I did attach to an email and send to all of you, which I'll do again at the end of this just to make sure everyone got them. But here's where a lot of these handouts are. So for example, those guidelines I mentioned, you can click here and download them. We have our watercraft inspection report form, fillable and not fillable. So lots of information here. There were some questions about ordering publications and stickers. And so under our AIS publications, that's where you can get those paper documents. So I'm going to click this, and then this is a big sheet, and look, we have lots of different sections in here. And so there are handouts about aquatic plants, invasives. Almost all of these are aquatic invasive publications. The online store that I just showed you for Clean Boats, Clean Waters, this is all for Clean Boats, Clean Waters gear and masks. But if you want stickers or other free materials, this is where you can find these and how to order them, okay? And I'll try to remember to attach that to the email that I send to you too. So I'll scroll back up here. So here are some of the video scenarios. And the intent of these when we made them was just sort of to be a supplement to the in-person training. There's this great intro of me being a talking head and telling you about the Clean Boats program. So you can skip that if you want. But these scenarios start with a complete watercraft inspection. So this video shows a mock inspection of what it would be like being an inspector, having a conversation, and then wrapping up the conversation. These, let's see, video 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are examples that start after the inspector has introduced themselves and asked if they can ask a few questions. Then these are different ways your encounter could go. So in this case, you're going to talk to a boater who has aquatic plants attached. In this case, this is how an inspector might talk to an angler who's been fishing elsewhere and they have water in their cooler. And so the point of these was just to offer different situations that the inspector could run into. And what it might be like talking to someone. And then this last video is just kind of a nice informative video where Chris Hammerle here, who works for Golden Sands RC&D, he walks us through taking prevention steps. So inspect, remove, drain, never move, and here are the areas on your boat that are a great places to check and make sure that there's no water or plants attached. So I'm gonna play the complete watercraft inspection video for you, or at least try to here. So I'm gonna pause it for a minute. Oops, I just muted it. And then I'm going to see if I can get it full screen so we can all, well, we'll see how fuzzy this is.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hello, my name's Tim and I'm with the local lake association, and we're sharing information about aquatic invasive species with folks who visit the lake this summer. Our lake has an invasive plant called Eurasian water milfoil, and we just want to make sure it doesn't get spread to other lakes. Have you talked to a person in a Clean Boats, Clean Waters blue shirt before?
No, not that I remember. We actually came here quite regularly last summer, and I don't remember seeing somebody with a shirt like that.
Well, our program is pretty new. We just realized that Eurasian water milfoil is spread really easily in the water and on boats, and we just want to ask a few questions.
Sure, you can do that, but I think you might be talking to the wrong person. We know all about plants. We take them off all the time, and honestly, this is the first time we've launched all season. So.
Oh. Okay, well, I understand. That's great to hear you're familiar with aquatic invasive species. Maybe you've also heard about the prevention steps, which are required by law, that you can take to make sure you're not transporting invasive species. They're pretty simple and logical, such as inspecting your boat and equipment and removing anything you find attached. Have you heard of this before?
Yep, we always remove the plants from the bottom of the boat and from the motor.
Your boat does look pretty clean, so it's important that you remove anything you find attached before leaving the boat landing. Plants often like to get stuck on boats, propellers, and trailers, and since invasive species can also be transported in water, Wisconsin law requires you to drain all your water from your boat and equipment before leaving the landing. Have you heard of this before? It is a newer law.
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I thought it was just if you were fishing, and we're not fishing today.
Well, it does apply to all boaters, and it's really important that you drain the water because tiny critters and plants can be in the water, so draining your water from any equipment and the motor in the boat can help prevent the spread of invasive species. I do have a sticker and a pamphlet that has the prevention steps on it that you can take home and check out.
Great,
so,
thanks.
Awesome, well, thanks.
Super.
Enjoy your day.
Bye.
So So that gives you a general idea. Because of the mic situation, the folks couldn't walk around the boat and actually look at the boat. So you would probably be walking around a little bit more with the individual, but it gives you a general idea of how these conversations can go. I'll play one more of these partial ones for you, and then I just kind of want to open this up to questions because I know we've reached our 3 o'clock time here. Let's see. So this scenario would be our inspector has just introduced themselves, and the local angler said they'd answer a few questions, and they happen to have water in their cooler. So let's see if we can.
Hans, would you mind if I look at your catch today?
Yeah, sure. It's right in there.
Well, it looks like you had some luck. Did you use artificial or live bait?
Oh yeah, always artificial. Live bait's way too much of a hassle.
Well, remember to drain your boat and cooler and live well if you have one. To make sure you have all the water and out of your boat before you leave the ramp.
Well, I drain my boat all the time, but I just leave the water in my cooler and I bring it home, keeps the fish alive, and I live right down the road, so just drain it there.
Yeah, the law reads, it requires you to drain all water from your boat and any container holding your catch, no matter whether you're going straight home or to another lake. Sorry if you're worried about keeping your catch fresh, ice is a good alternative.
So I just gotta drain it here? What are you guys worried about?
Well, what we're worried about is invasive species like zebra mussels, small plant fragments that are easily transported in your water. I know you mentioned you only use this lake, but there are many anglers that jump from lake to lake, water body to water body. I have a pamphlet and a sticker that'll tell you a little more if you'd like.
Yeah, sure.
You have any other questions?
Nope, thank you.
Thank you and have a nice day.
All right, thank you.
Hans, here's those pamphlets and sticker I told you about with the
nice. Thank you.
Draining the water and keeping your boat clean.
All right, great. Well, I'll take a look at them. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, so that kind of showed you a couple of those scenarios, but since and these scenarios are available for anyone to watch, as you could see. You can definitely check all of these out anytime, since we can't do our role playing and things today. But let me open up our chat here, and we'll see what other questions have come up, or please feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like and ask any questions that have come up.
Erin, this is Amy. I think that you covered the questions that Eileen had about stickers because you showed her, you showed everybody how to find those supplies that are both on our site and then the additional supplies like the free stickers and things like that. She also had a question about signs, and I'm not sure exactly, Eileen, maybe you can ask if you had a specific question about AIS signs that are available also on that document or some other kind of sign. I'll let you.
I think Erin answered that question following that my text to you. I just wanted a yard sign, the yard sign that she was speaking about.
Got it, Eileen. And I'm sorry, Eileen, what part of the state were you in? Oneida County?
Oneida County, Hasbrook Lake. Yeah, it's just right outside of Lake Tomahawk.
Yes, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to have those signs available before the end of this month so that we can get those out. And so probably what we'll do is ask Stephanie to help get in contact with everyone to know where the pickup location is for your area.
Yeah, she's doing an on-site training for us on the 27th of June, so maybe you could get them to her before then.
We'll see. I'm hoping so.
Okie doke.
Thank you. Sorry for the vague answer. We're in the process of ordering, but
sure.
You know, we order from companies and they kind of, yeah.
Thanks.
We will do our best for sure. I see Darcy had a question. Good question. Good idea for each person to have their own clipboard and data sheets. but the way it operates for their area is it goes into a lockbox at the launch after they complete their form. I think, you know, using hand sanitizer often, they go into the lockbox. I don't think that's going to be a concern, Darcy. We didn't recommend that really gloves were necessary at the boat landing because you're not seeing as much, you know, it's not skin-to-skin contact and those sorts of concerns. So I don't think that would be a problem for all of you, especially if those data sheets are going to be sitting in there. I think just trying to, you know, use that hand sanitizer and take some extra precautions, and, you know, just like when we all have to go to a grocery store or whatnot, but that's a good question. I think being aware of that and making sure people have access to, you know, hand sanitizer if they can't wash their hands is hopefully will help.
Oh, this is Darcy. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Okay. So, you know, we have 20 or probably even more people volunteering, sometimes only maybe 6 hours an entire season. So it's a good thing that clipboards are cheap on Amazon, that's for sure. But my concern is some may not have any activity on their forms. Some may have, you know, use 2 or 3 forms. So if I give an average number of forms attached to the clipboard that nobody else will touch, can I expect people to have to print out more forms if they need it? Because not everybody has printers at their lake house. So just trying to follow the guidelines, but there are some like detailed questions like that. I don't want to have to, you know, find out where they live and give them a personalized second packet of forms. Or how do you handle something like that?
Yeah, and you know, if the clipboard issue, the other option is you can disinfect clipboards regularly. You know, that's why we just said, let's just not share supplies. But if you're in a situation where like, I can't buy 24 clipboards or whatever it is, you know, I understand, you know. For the data sheets, we have asked lake groups and citizens or universities or whoever's involved in the inspections to print off their own data sheets.
Okay.
So I do, if that's ever a huge hindrance to anyone's participation, please let me know and I'll see if I can help with that. I know this situation this summer makes everything more exciting and frustrating.
Just a little more complicated, and I just can't, you know, I either have to meet a new inspector or any of our returning inspectors if they don't have one. I can't fit more than a couple clipboards in our box. It's very small, so we get to meet and greet everybody, but I'm not 24/7 at our lake, so that makes it a little more logistically challenging.
No, it's a good option, and I wouldn't expect everyone to bring their own clipboard from home, but I know I have at least one at my house, and so I don't know if you ever got into a pinch. Sarah just shared a really good idea regarding clipboards in the chat box. She said that with students and teachers in classrooms, they've used just pieces of cardboard with a rubber band around the top. So if that was a concern, you know, it's one way that people could hold their paper there and then you're not having to go out and buy.
They don't cost very much. I just don't know once I purchase them, I can't store them anywhere. I'd have to meet up with each inspector that doesn't have their own. So.
Right.
Okay, that's it. But that's why hand sanitizer exists. We have a lockbox down by our launch for people putting in their boats and for our inspectors.
Okay.
Yeah. A sprayer. Okay.
Good question. I'm sure there's going to be lots of those little things that come up that are like, well, this wasn't a problem in the past, but now there's a challenge here.
Yeah, right. If there isn't anybody talking right now besides me, I just want to thank you for all these videos.
Yeah, I hope they're helpful. They're the DNR was wonderful to let us help us film those a few years ago now. So I'm glad they didn't see this coming, but glad that we have them available to us right now.
We have them posted on our Lake Association website, and then I have all the inspector handouts and forms as some pre-learning things, and also for people who have never volunteered to see that it's not scary. So you can kind of get an idea of what it's all about. So you're having those.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Hi, Erin. My name is Linda Adams. I was the one on Hasbrook too, and we're beginning this whole process of clean boats, clean waters. And my curious question is, so after watching that video about the man with the water in the cooler, and what if these boaters are coming, they kind of jump around lakes up by our area. So they'll go on, let's say Lake Tomahawk one for the first morning, and then they'll jump over to Hasbrook in the afternoon, and we don't, catch them coming in, but we catch them coming out, and they never drain their cooler from Lake Tomahawk to Hasbrook. You know what I'm saying? So the water came from Lake Tomahawk, went to Hasbrook. Then if we ask them to drain, they're draining Lake Tomahawk water into Hasbrook. Is that something that I can bring up with them if I'm inspecting to say, is this water in here that you're draining, or you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense, what I'm trying to say?
No, it makes perfect sense. And, I think a safe option would be too, just to let people know, like, you can drain it, but instead of draining it right on the boat ramp, like,
Yes.
Hans did in that video,
Right.
can we do that on shore? At least that's soaking into the dirt, and you feel like that's a little bit safer of an option.
Yes, that's what I was thinking, because I can just imagine that water just draining right back into the lake, and I'd rather be up, be up like 20 feet from there into the, the dirt. So yeah, thank you.
Yes, great question. Well, I'm going to just leave you with a few slides here, and then I'm happy to stick around and discuss or answer questions or talk things through for however long you guys would like. I'm going to close this box there. Okay, so just to wrap things up, I think everyone's probably caught on to this as we've talked about the Clean Boats, Clean Waters program, but really what we're going for is behavior change. We want to try to show people the appropriate behaviors we want them to take, making that personal contact. We're not able to offer maybe the prompts like the stickers and brochures that we normally can, but we can still encourage the behaviors and model those behaviors for people. And I just shared some suggestions about how to help make sure you have an effective watercraft inspection program. On the right there, that's the boat landing sign that we should have at all of our state boat landings across Wisconsin. So hopefully you've seen that sign before. But I think all of this information I sort of covered in today's PowerPoint. But I wanted to leave you with this quote from Doug Mackenzie Moore's book on fostering sustainable behavior. It says, the major influence on our attitudes and behaviors, not the media, but rather our contact with other people. It's so funny to read this and think about this now in this time where we are trying to limit our contact with other people. I think that's why all of this is so challenging, because we all thrive in human interaction, whether it's we learn better face to face, we interact and have positive connections and learn things face to face. And so I think that's why watercraft inspection is such a successful program in just helping boaters and anglers understand the concerns, and especially the fact that it's those of you in a lot of cases who actually live on these lakes and are part of these lake associations. They can see the passion and the commitment that all of you have for keeping your lakes safe and healthy. So I'll leave you with that, and I'm going to put my contact information up on the screen here. I think we showed sort of how to order things, but my contact information, which you probably already have, and the contact information for the person who is a super helper with all of our database, data reporting, swims issues, Jake. And his name's on a lot of our handouts too. But I think I saw something. I'll check the chat box real quick here. And then, yeah, let me know. Please feel free to unmute or share more questions. So George was asking if we recommend wash stations at boat landings, or maybe in towns that are available to boaters. Yeah, it's a good question, George. There are, I think boat wash stations are becoming more common in certain areas of the state. We are continually trying to figure out, we have portable boat wash stations in a few places, and other places have installed permanent ones. Cost is a huge element of it, the layout of the landing and the space for it. making sure that people who would be operating it regularly are very highly trained, because a lot of times those high powered could be hot water, also boat wash stations. You would definitely have to have a very well trained individual running them. So I think wash stations can play a really important role and be very useful in a lot of cases. I don't know if I think they would be the right fit for every boat landing though. So it's a good question. If you're looking for more resources or information about boat wash stations, let me know and I can send you to someone who might know more. I really appreciate all of you joining me today, and I'm really sad that I can't see all of your faces in person. makes all of this even more fun, but I appreciate you taking the time and sticking with me for this really long training. I know we went over time. I apologize. Can I answer anyone else's questions, or does anyone want to unmute and share anything or have any further questions for us today?
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Linda. Thank you, everyone.